You were an engineer before you became engineering manager, and then you became product manager. And as a product manager, you have not only obviously helped build features, but also done market research, and also more recently you have led Indian team at ThoughtSpot on user experience. So I think one of the questions that comes up very frequently is how did you transition across these roles?
A very apt question, Ajay. And I think if you look at it from a problem solving approach, right, what do product managers really do? What are they responsible for? So essentially, typically what PMs are responsible for, there's a team who is looking up towards them to make decisions for them, to figure out what needs to be built and drive that decision across the organization, across your customer base, etc. Right. So decision making is a very core part of your role. Right. And similarly, product thinking, I think product intuition is something that, it's a skill. It's like, how you observe your human behavior, trained by like data, and then you apply it to a software, right? So that's about the product thinking skills. And of course, there are other skills like stakeholder management and then problem solving. How do you break down the problem? There are many ways of transitioning. You can transition within your own company. You can transition by picking up a, associate PM role in a larger organization. My favorite one is to join an early stage startup, and that's primarily because you not only get to understand the PM role, it's also about creating the business. And many a times, a lot of people who want to move into product management, they don't really know if they want to really do product management for the longest time of their career. So startup exposure gives them that visibility that, okay, this is the area that they want to grow into. Transitioning within your company and joining an early stage startup, I think these are my favorite ones because you have some credibility within your organization. And secondly, when you join a startup, if you're not very sure is the product management is your calling, you can experience the other verticals as well.
You have also done market research and you're leading the team on user experience. And I request you to share one project where you or your team members help create significant impact for the company.
Capillary Technology is an omni-channel engagement platform, right? So essentially what you see when you shop at, say, Peter England shop or any other shop, there's a loyalty program that runs we are collecting customer data, we are running the campaigns, we are ensuring our North Star is to be able to drive the customer back to the store, right? How do we drive that, right? So if you look at the entire configuration, essentially the problem was that, and if you look at the Indian ecosystem of retailers, we were serving offline retailers, and most of those organizations were used to the fact that there is a partner who is doing things for you. For example, if they have to run campaigns, essentially there will be like Capillary Technologies was running campaigns for them. We were extracting reports, we were doing analysis on their data, right? And therefore, there were a lot of inefficiencies that were created in the organization. We were spending like good amount of money in serving those customers, which essentially could be served by themselves. Like they could serve themselves by using the product themselves. So we were spending a lot of money there. So we came up with a goal that we want to reduce or increase the productivity, rather, let's say it like that. So increase the productivity of internal delivery teams and customer account management teams by 50%, right? And we broke down the problem. And what essentially we did was, I think what we first did is we interviewed the internal stakeholders, right? Who they spend time with. Now, interviewing versus actually doing their job is very different. Yeah. So even though we started with interview, we realized that these are the common ones that we are hearing. We are not hearing any deeper problems that they might be kind of facing. Right. And that's when we decided that PMs will start spending time with delivery managers and sit in their seats and essentially do what they do in a daily life, right? And that was the key for us. Like we actually figured out a lot of I myself sat with one of the delivery managers and I was surprised at the way he was running campaigns. Right. I was literally surprised to see that. So we had collected data through interviews. The next stage was sitting with them, spending the day the way they spend their days, talking to customers as a delivery manager, understanding their pain points, because some of the customers can be really demanding, right? And spending that time gave us the perspective. And of course, we had the data. We had the data that, how much time does it take to run a campaign from start to end, etc. So all these things, we broke down the problem and we figured out, literally what will help the team, right? Just to give you an example, we had a scale of 50 million, 500 million plus consumers. We were serving those many consumers through the platform. And imagine the amount of campaigns delivery managers has to, and used to run on a daily basis. So that was a huge problem for them. And one of the core problems we figured out was it takes a long time to filter those customer out basis the conditions that are sort of given by the customers. And then we figured out that we need to ensure that the analytics platform, which is the backbone, needs to drastically change with respect to execution speed, the capability, the scaling, etc. So we focused on that. So that is how we did. And using this process, initially we were able to achieve 30%, and the rest of the 20% we could not achieve, but we were in the path of achieving, because one of the key objectives was, can we move this entire process and ensure that customers start using the product themselves.
Right.
There's a big drive of making that product completely self-serve. But by the time I had decided to move on from Capillary, but yeah, that's one of the biggest sort of impact in the organization that we made.
In this process, you also mentioned earlier that there were a bunch of things that didn't work out.
Remember when I mentioned that we started with interviewing the internal stakeholders and trying to prepare a list. Okay, this is my prioritized list, etc. And that's typically how a product manager works, which is we'll interview the users. As we started working on those prioritized list, we realized that it's actually not solving the problem. And specifically talking about one of the reporting needs was comparative analysis. Typically they do comparative analysis, and this was coming as a feedback from the internal stakeholders. So essentially they said that we spend a lot of time doing comparative analysis, computing ROI, and we spend a lot of time designing such kind of automated reports for ROI, right? And it didn't move the metric at all, right? And that's when we thought it was not like we understood the problem and we knew that we had to go sit with the delivery managers right then and there. So this was because of these failures that we realized that no, we need to really go spend time, and because this is an amazing opportunity. You have your customer right in front of you, which is typically not possible, right? You can't spend a day with your customers in their office, and now it is even more difficult. So yeah, so we did that, and that was the biggest learning for me in this project was shadowing and doing what the users do yourself is very different. And therefore the concept of dog food can be really powerful if you do that like really, really nicely.
Look back and just say, what was your biggest takeaway or learning that can help others as well?
Right. Understanding user problem is the most challenging part in any product definition. Right? You can build products, you can experiment, etc. But unless you have understood the core problem, no matter how cool your product is, how complex your product is, unless it's serving the core problem of the user, it won't make any difference to your customer, no matter how many resources you have put in, no matter how much money you have spent in that. So that's my core learning, which is in the product management process, the key is to focus on the user problem. And in B2B space specifically, the problem is not directly, like you can't derive at a problem by interviewing users. Sometimes they are orthogonal, which you're not able to see right in front of you. Context is much larger in a B2B space. So you need to understand their entire day and figure out not just entire day, what do they work on, what additional things. So what is the user motivation for solving this problem? How big is that problem for the user? If they spend like 1 hour or 15 minutes every day, I don't think that's a big problem, right? You need to really figure out that problem. So that's the key.